Okay, good morning. Let's start. So I hope if you're working back and forth between doing the reading, going to section, doing the reading, coming to lecture, doing the reading, I hope if you're working back and forward like that, that the Wittgenstein selections are coming into focus to the extent that it's readable at this point. Is that, how are you finding it? Is it complete? I mean, I think it's a very common natural first reaction that I can't make head or tail of any of this. But I hope at this point it's starting to seem a bit, really, you can read it and see what he's doing. Can you put your hand up if you're still finding it totally impenetrable? Sorry? Not totally, relatively. There's something else about reading the Wittgenstein I should have said earlier. It seems to me it's perfectly legitimate to take an entire afternoon, take 3 or 4 hours, just looking at one of these paragraphs. I mean, there's quite a lot in the reader, and what you will find is if you spend 3 or 4 hours on one paragraph, something that seems interesting and worth engaging with to you, if you spend 3 or 4 hours on that, then I promise you what you will find is that all the rest of the paragraphs get easier. There's something fractal about it. If you zoom in on one small section, then all the rest actually comes into focus too. So don't be afraid. There's a lot there, so anyone's tendency is to kind of rush over it and feel you've got to get the whole lot and you don't have time to spend a couple of hours in just a few sentences. But actually, that is the only way that you really make progress with this stuff. Okay. Any questions or comments in general about how you're finding the Wittgenstein right now? Okay. Okay, well, feel free to raise general reflections in the course, because today, I think today we're going fairly close to the centre of what's going on there. So, Kripke says, Wittgenstein discussing rule following is putting forward a skeptical paradox and a skeptical solution to the skeptical paradox. So, I'll start out by just going over what that comes to. The idea of the skeptical paradox is that there are no facts of the matter about meaning and understanding. The idea of the skeptical solution is that's right, there are no facts of the matter about meaning and understanding, but we can live with that, that's okay. And then, secondly, I want to look at one kind of problem that arises, one kind of issue that arises. If you can't make sense of facts of the matter about meaning, then maybe you can't make sense of there being any facts of the matter at all. That really seems disturbing. That doesn't seem like a solution. That just seems like a new paradox. So I'll try and lay that out. And then, finally, I'll take a look at another implication that Wittgenstein's picture seems to have, which is that there isn't a world of facts out there where things are so independently of whether we investigate them. Michael Dummett once talked about the world coming into being, springing into being in response to our probing. It's not that the world is there anyway. It all kind of bobs up as we ask questions about it. And you might wonder if Wittgenstein's picture doesn't commit him to something like that. So this is really to top ground where I take the central ideas here to be, the most important ideas here to be. So let's go over the skeptical paradox. The skeptical paradox was, as Kripke put it, there are these two hypotheses about what you meant when you were using plus in the past. One hypothesis, I meant addition, and the other hypothesis, well, I meant quus, where x quus y is the same as x plus y, and x and y are less than 57, and 5 otherwise. So you remember the argument there. The examples you gave, the examples you added, the particular cases you added, you used the plus sign with in the past don't determine whether you meant plus or quus. Nothing that was in your mind, no causal chains, nothing like that determines whether you meant plus or quus. Therefore, nothing at all establishes that you meant plus rather than quus. That's familiar at this point? Yeah. Therefore, there's no fact that establishes that you meant one thing rather than another by plus. And that's quite general. There's no fact of the matter as to what you meant by plus, but the form of the argument here is obviously very general, so you could state it for any sign at all. So there's never any fact of the matter as to what you meant by any sign, how you were understanding any sign in the past. So there's no fact of the matter as to what meaning you're associating with any sign, how you're understanding any sign now. And that's the skeptical problem, right? That seems to imply that language is impossible. We can't talk about meaning and understanding. Yes? That's what seems to blow up the possibility of language. And then the solution that Kripke's giving begins by agreeing there is no fact of the matter about what you meant or what you understood in the use of the plus sign. That's right. That's why it's a skeptical solution. It acknowledges this to the skeptic. What Kripke calls a straight solution is when you say, yes, there is a fact of the matter here. You haven't considered speaker intentions, or you haven't considered how people were educated. There's something here, your brain structure, as someone suggested. There's some fact here that you've missed out. Kripke's skeptical solution says, no, there isn't any fact here that we missed out. There is no fact about whether you meant one thing rather than another by the plus sign. But still, the solution bit comes when he says, it still might be correct to say that you meant one thing rather than another, that you meant addition rather than quaddition by the plus sign. Okay, so the thing is, how can you have both of those? And the idea is, correct is a broader thing than there being such a fact. There are lots of uses of language that aren't fact-stating. And if you just take someone saying hello, right, or good morning class, and you say, well, what does that come to? It's a mistake to look for a fact there, something out there in the world that the hello corresponds to. But there are obviously correct and incorrect uses of hello, right? I mean, like right now, if I say hello, you know, that's kind of incongruous. It would suggest that I thought nobody was listening to me or something. You see what I mean? So correct and incorrect apply to hello, even though it's not fact stating. Yeah. So the question is, can we get talk about correctness or incorrectness for meaning and understanding into the picture, even if we don't regard this as fact-stating discourse? And hello seems like a long way from he means addition by the plus sign. Something that's maybe a little bit closer is that's funny. If someone says that's funny, then if you're very literal minded, you might say that's kind of a strange phenomenon, funniness, that some things have and some things don't. Funniness doesn't show up in physics, right? Physics tells us everything there is in the world, but funniness doesn't show up in physics. And how do you know about whether something's funny or not anyhow? The only way you can know about it is by way of your sense of humor. So you have this sense of humor that probes the funniness of things. Yeah? Funniness is something out there that your sense of humor probes, but physics can't get at it. Physics can't tell you whether something is funny or not. That's really weird. What is funniness? How come you can only get at it in this one way, by way of your sense of humor? And one natural reaction there would be to say, that's just a mistake. In a way, that's taking the talk about funniness too seriously. Saying that's funny is just a kind of, what should I say, it's a kind of verbalized laughter. Yeah, it is itself a response to what's going on out there that doesn't involve stating a fact about the world. That's not the kind of thing it is. If someone just laughs, that's not reporting a fact about what's going on out there. And if they articulate it into this kind of response, they're still not stating a fact about the world, but it might still be correct or incorrect to say of something that it's funny. I might say that's not funny. He was really hurt. Yeah. You might say that's not funny at all. you were being really rude to him. Yeah, so we can correct each other's talk about funniness without thinking there's a world of facts out there that the funniness is reporting. So I think it's fair to say that it's something like that kind of status that Wittgenstein wants for talk about meaning and understanding, that Wittgenstein wants for meaning and understanding. It's not that it's reporting facts about the world. So that skeptical bit about there's no fact that you meant addition rather than something else by the plus sign, but we can still have talk of correctness here. So it's obviously going to be a different kind of case from saying hello or talking about what's funny or not, but it's the same broad category. So the picture I think you get in Kripke is, suppose that you've got your child who's trying to learn to add or something like that, and they give lots of correct. At the start, they're all over the place. They don't even give a numerical answer. Maybe they just talk about something different when you say, "What do you get if you add 3 and 4?" After a bit, they're starting to do it. They're starting to give correct, what we regard as correct answers to examples. And after a bit of training, they go on and we say, "By God, she's got it," right? That's it. She cracked it, now she knows. And what that is doing is not stating a fact. It is, how should I say, gathering this person into the community of counters. Yeah? It is a kind of cry of welcome. You're on board. You're one of us. You can count, right? And what that comes to, that kind of cry of welcome, is that we're going to have some trust in this person, that now they know how to go on, and we just rely on this brute fact that now they'll agree with the rest of us in what they say. So I was giving that example of if you're hiring someone to work the cash till in a store or to work as a waiter, then taking cash, then you need to be able to trust this person's responses. And what happens when you're selecting someone is you say, "Well, can you do this stuff?" You got the selection process, and then you say, "Yes, this person can count, this person can do it," and you gather them in. That's what the talk about meaning and understanding is that kind of gathering in. Yeah. So it can be correct or incorrect, but it's not stating a fact about the world. It's just whether we're going to say "come in" or not. So it's important, it's certainly connected this, but it's important to separate this from the idea that there is a fact of the matter about what a sign means, but it's just stated at the level of the community rather than at the level of the individual. If you, as an idea, it's natural to have when you see Wittgenstein's emphasis on customs and practices and agreement with other people, that what he really means is getting it right means saying the same thing as everyone else. Getting it wrong means saying something different to everyone else. So it is fact stating what someone means by a sign, but all that meaning and understanding come to is that you agree with everyone else. Just what's the word I want? Jackbooting along with everyone else. That makes it right what you say. But that can't be the right way to put it. That's not what Kripke's Wittgenstein at any rate wants. That if you said, well, what about the community? Did the community as a whole mean plus rather than quas in the past when it was using addition? I suppose 57 is a number that's so big that no one in the community has ever added 2 numbers below, greater than 57 before. Yep. And then we say, consider the community as a whole. What did we mean by plus rather than quas? Well, you've got the same problem. Nothing in the examples that the community used in the past makes it the case that they meant plus rather than quas. Nothing that was going through anyone's head makes it the case that they meant plus rather than quas. So it's not that there's a fact here, but it's stated at the level of the community. Yeah?
Doesn't the
That's right. The community does have to be formed out of particular individuals, yeah.
So then, like, how does, I guess, the original meaning?
That's right. Well, I think that's very good. I mean, there's a way of thinking of it. I mean, it's natural to think when you read Wittgenstein that he needs a custom or practice. He says one person couldn't mean anything on their own, yeah. And that makes it sound like meaning is something very heavy. You know, that of course you can't lift it on your own, but if I got some help, you know, if there are 4 or more people there, then lifting it is no problem. Yeah. But if it's something very heavy, then you can see how it helps having other people there. You know, you each lift a little bit. But your question is, if none of the individuals considered on their own mean one thing rather than another, then how can the whole community be meaning one thing rather than another? Yeah. Is that a way to put it? From those parts?
Yeah.
Yeah, and if the parts don't have meaning and understanding in them, then what's going on? How do you... It seems miraculous that the community could be doing it if the individuals couldn't doing it on their own. Yeah, is that? Yeah. I think that's exactly right. That's another way of playing this, of getting at this same point, really, that it's not that there's a fact at the level of the community about meaning and understanding, that there wasn't at the level of the individual. There isn't any fact at all about meaning and understanding at the level of the community. Okay, follow me very closely here. There's really a lot of spin in the ball at this point. Yes, and so keep raising questions because this is, I think I've got it, but there is a lot of spin in the ball here. I agree with you that it looks as if what he's saying is that the community can do something that the individual can't. But I think that is not quite the right way to think of it. It's that we've got a notion of correctness rather than a notion of fact at the level of the community. Yeah, and just as, well, if you take hello, then if you take greetings and farewells, you know, kind of Starbucks conversation stuff, yeah, then there's correctness there. It's not fact-stating discourse. Well, not the way I do it, anyway. It's socially acceptable. Exactly. There's some notion of social acceptability there that isn't the same thing as being correct in your fact stating. Yeah? But if you're asking to explain what correctness or incorrectness for hello and goodbye come to, then you need a community. You need to talk about the community because these are essentially social, these things. Yeah? They're interpersonal. Yeah? So it's not that there are facts about is hello true or something at the level of the community that there aren't at the level of the individual. That's what you're objecting to. That's a bizarre picture. Yeah, how could that have happened? Yeah, but what is perfectly sensible is that there can be standards of correctness that only make sense in relation to a community, where these aren't standards for fact stating.
So say, like, if you go to the beginning of time or whatever.
If you go to the beginning of time.
An individual and then another individual, and then the person says hello.
Right.
And then it's basically, wouldn't it be dependent on whether or not the second person accepts it or not?
That's right. That's exactly right. Yeah.
And that is how, I guess.
Exactly. You couldn't if you consider the very first person, right? If you consider just one person on their own, then they can't use hello, goodbye, right? It's a very poignant thought, you know, the idea of this guy going around saying hello, but there's nobody there, right? It doesn't make sense to say, well, of him, he used hello or goodbye correctly or incorrectly, yeah? To have standards of correctness for hello or goodbye, you need a community, yeah? That's not to say that there is a fact that you're reporting when you say hello. Only, it's that only a community can report this fact. You see what I mean? That's the bizarre thing that you're objecting to. Yeah? They could, and they certainly could, and you really might negotiate that. I mean, it's one of the strange things coming from Britain to America, that these standards of ordinary greetings are actually subtly but significantly different. I mean, in America, the ordinary greetings are much warmer than they are in Britain, right? People come up to you in a store and say, how are you today? And I'm like, well, my leg's a bit better. And, you know, and it takes a little while to calibrate, you know, how that kind of thing goes. So there can be negotiation about standards of correctness here. And similarly with meaning and understanding, yeah, there can be negotiation. You say, no, he doesn't really get it when you're adding. You know, you can see there are glitches. You see what I mean? Or with, there are more complex cases like democracy. He doesn't actually know what democracy is. Where we do actually negotiate these things. So I just agree with that. That's an important point. But saying that you can negotiate these things, these standards of correctness, isn't the same thing as saying that what we have here is fact-stating discourse. So talk about meaning and understanding. When we say he understands, he gets it, that's to be thought of as like the hello stuff.
So like meaning and understanding is more tied to correctness.
Exactly.
than it is to fact.
Exactly. That's exactly it. Yeah. Okay. Good. Excellent. Right. Yeah. Yeah.
Does this standard of correctness depend on a community made of different people with like different opinions and mindsets, or could it come from like what if there's one person who just cloned himself over and over?
Yeah.
And all have the exact same notions? Would they still be-
That's a great question. Straight off, I don't see why it would matter. But it is interesting when we have the same kind of language we do if we were all, if it was entirely cloned.
Because if you say you can't have the standard of correctness with one person,
Yeah.
but then if there's a community made of that one person over and over, then what's the difference?
Oh, what's the difference? Well, but just this is kind of a trivial example, but it's so easy to see what's going on here. If you think about your community of clones and the use of hello and goodbye and so on, if you just got the original, what would be the zero, the uncloned original, then it doesn't make sense to talk about standards of correctness for hello and goodbye that zero has. Yeah.
So you're saying the standards of correctness comes from the number of people, not what the people consist of?
It only makes sense to be using these signs, hello and goodbye, when there's a whole bunch of people around. Yeah. It doesn't really make sense for one person on their own. I mean, if I end a conversation with saying hello, or if I start the conversation by saying goodbye, yeah, then these things are inappropriate. Yeah, but they're only appropriate or inappropriate when there are a number of people there. If there's just one individual, then there's no saying when a use of hello or goodbye is correct. Yeah? Yeah. So it's not that there are, so that exactly fits that model. There's something that can happen when there's a whole community around that can't happen when there's just one person. And now they talk about meaning and understanding. That it's a long way. There are a lot of differences here, but it basically fits that same model. There are standards of. I'll try and say more about this in a second. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not sure how to phrase this question. Is correctness just supposed to be interchangeable with agreement, or is it supposed to be something importantly different? Because it sounds like, I guess correctness makes it sound sort of normative. Like
Yes, correctness is meant to be normative. Yeah.
Okay, well then where does the normativity
Come from.
because it's just like, if you grow up in this community, it seems strange that all of a sudden you have some sort of normative constraints to use your
Yeah.
language the right way.
Yeah.
When it doesn't seem like you do it all, you could misuse the language all you want and mean all
Yeah.
sorts of different things.
Okay. Excellent question. I'll try and indicate in just a moment how far I think we get in the Kripke and Wittgenstein on this. But that's a key question. Yeah. It doesn't come from there being facts about normativity. But so in the sense in which through so much of this course we've been looking for the facts that ground normativity, where in the physical world does normativity come from? We're actually rejecting that question at this point. It would be like saying, where in the physical world do the facts about hello and goodbye come from? You know, is it molecular? Well, that's just the wrong question. Yeah, there is a kind of normativity here, but it's not to be understood as grounded in factual matters. It's not grounded in the facts. That's not the kind of talk we've got.
So not even like facts about the agreement amongst the members of the community?
We couldn't have.
You just aren't even allowed to use that sort of.
Well, we couldn't have the kind of correctness or incorrectness conditions we have here unless we had agreement among the members of the community. But that's not to say that it's derived from agreement among the members of the community or that it's explained in terms of it. Let me, I want to look at some stuff from Wittgenstein here that actually bears directly on this. So, I mean, you know, these are paragraphs to puzzle over, actually. But since Wittgenstein and Kripke are addressing your question, let me try and give you their answers to what you're raising. So here's Kripke in a passage we looked at already. Here's how the normativity works. It's not quite like hello and goodbye, but this is, I mean, it's not the same thing as hello and goodbye, obviously, but it's like hello and goodbye. If an individual passes enough tests, the community accepts him as a rule follower. So you get it right in enough occasions, we'll say, well done, you're following the rule. That's all that happens. There's nothing in the head, nothing hidden here. All that happens is the individual gives what we regard as the right answers often enough to particular examples, and then we say, you're a rule follower. And that enables the individual to engage in certain types of interactions with everybody else in the society that depend on their reliance on his responses. So if you think about the cash till person here, that's exactly what's going on. Yeah, we're going to accept you as a counter, as an adder here, as somebody who's grasped arithmetic. The success of these practices depends on the brute empirical fact that we do agree with each other in our responses. So this whole thing, this is Kripke addressing just your question, yeah? This whole thing wouldn't work unless we did in fact all agree on what went on in particular cases. But it's not that we're defining this as a matter of the correctness of what someone says as a matter of them agreeing with everyone else. Yeah? There's got to be that stability. So here's Wittgenstein, this is right at the end of the passages in the reader, addressing the same point, I think. So you are saying, this is, you know, his demon, right, saying this to him. So you are saying that human agreement decides what is true and what is false. And I think the answer is that that's kind of in the ballpark, but it's not quite right. That's Wittgenstein's response. It is what human beings say that is true or false, and they agree in the language. They agree in the language they use. It's agreement not in opinions, but in form of life. So there's going to be that bedrock that we talked about with Campbell of shared interests, shared senses of humour, shared patterns of concern, underlying all our uses of language. There's got to be that background similarity between us all, that we all go on in the same way in particular cases. But that's the backdrop to getting truth or falsity in language. Yeah. And here's the last thing in the sections from the reader. If a language is to be a means of communication, there must be agreement not only in definitions, but also, queer as this may sound, in judgments. So people say, well, you've got to define your terms. Well, sure, and we've got all the same definitions. Sure, that's all right. But it's not just that. If language is going to work at all, we've got to agree in what we judge about particular cases. We say, this is red, that's not red. We agree, this is 125, this is 5. We agree in all these particular cases, in these judgments. That seems to abolish logic, but it does not do so. Is one thing to describe methods of measurement and another to obtain and state results of measurement. But what we call measuring is partly determined by a certain constancy in results of measurement. So a way to put this is, suppose I'm just measuring the length of a table. So I got a tape measure, I measure the length of the table. Getting it right in when I'm measuring the length of the table isn't a matter of my agreeing with everybody else who's measured it, right? That's not the definition of measurement. But if we lived in a quite different world, if we lived in a world where tape measures kept shrinking and contracting, objects kept expanding and changing shape, everything was unstable, you couldn't do a repeated measurement, then our whole use of tape measures would just go out of the window. It wouldn't make sense to talk about measuring the length of a table. Is the table shifting, the measure's shifting? Yeah. So measuring just requires that we live in a world that makes measurement possible. That requires a stability in the world, a background stability in the world. Then what you're getting with the measurement isn't defined in terms of that underlying constancy, but the whole activity of measuring is only made possible by that underlying constancy. That's the picture, I think. There's got to be a background of agreement for the use of language to work at all. That was that Campbell thing about civilization is only made possible by the brute fact that we do go on agreeing in our responses. But that's not to say that the agreement in responses is the fact that constitutes the rightness or wrongness of our judgments. Yep?
Can you explain that first part where you say it is what we say about it?
Okay, I'll take a shot at it, right? But this bears a lot of reflection. Yeah. It is what human beings say that is true and false, and they agree in the language they use. Well, I should say incidentally, I think it's not the right attitude to what Wittgenstein is saying in these paragraphs, that these are kind of crystallized truth, and our task is just as humble interpreters to try and figure out what he meant. I think there is always something tortured about these passages in Wittgenstein. He is not ever quite convinced that he's managing to put it right himself, if you see what I mean. The prose here is really him constantly struggling to try and get it right and very aware that he's not quite getting it right and going back over it. And that's why he writes like that, because he's never quite convinced that he's put it correctly. You see what I mean? So he keeps not coming back to the same things and trying to get deeper and deeper into them. So it's not that there's a kind of fixed thing here. Yeah? Having said that, let me say what I think the picture is. The picture you're getting in this paragraph is that talking about truth and falsity kind of bobs in the surface of language. It's truth and false. To say that P is true is just the same thing as saying P. Yeah. So saying that the chair is beside the door, saying it's true that the chair is beside the door is just the same thing as saying the chair is beside the door. Yeah. So it's what human beings say that is true and false, but being able to say that the chair is beside the door depends on there being this deeper level of agreement between you and me as to what we'll call a chair, what we think a chair is for, what kinds of activities you might go in for. I mean, if you consider a bat, but bats don't really do chairs the way humans do, if you see what I mean. A bat would never get a chair that it found comfortable or uncomfortable for that matter, right? If you're dealing with bats, then talk about chairs is just off the board, right? There is no way you're going to get a bat to cotton on to what you're after when you talk about chairs. You see what I mean? So the fact that you and I can talk about chairs so comfortably and easily depends on this background agreement between us in what we think of as a chair, what ways we use a chair, that kind of thing. So there's agreement. What matters is not agreement in opinions. It's not that when I say that's a chair, I get a kind of big chorus going up, yes, well done, that is indeed a chair. That's not the important thing. The important thing is that there's background congruence in form of life in the way that chairs fit into our life. Does that make sense? Is that addressing? We don't have to. I think my reading is this isn't saying we have to agree case by case. I can really be a holdout. I mean, like Galileo, I could say the Earth moves, and I get this chorus of opposition from everybody, and they say, no, it doesn't. The sun moves, the earth is static. Right? That doesn't necessarily, this picture doesn't require that that makes me wrong. Yeah, I think that's what he's saying there, that human agreement doesn't decide what is true and what is false, because it could be that Galileo was the one right person and everybody else wrong. But for that use of the signs, the earth round, moving, staying the same, even to make sense, there's got to be this background stability in how we all think and talk. Yeah. So it's like that thing about the measuring. Talking about the length of something isn't the same thing as saying, oh, well, it doesn't move, it doesn't change shape, the tape doesn't change shape. You're not saying all that stuff. You're just saying what length it is. But that talk about length depends on a background of stability in the physical world. Yep.
On the previous point, so is he saying about the empirical basis of our understanding, is he saying that we know empirical things more than non-empirical things? It seems like truths like a priori truths and logical
Yeah.
considerations or something are reliant on our social understandings or the community agreement
Yeah.
on the standards of correctness. So
Right,
there are external factors to what is, would otherwise perceived as empirical fact. So is he drawing, like, it's a consequence of this argument that we know empirical things more than non-empirical things?
No, I think that's what he's trying to get at there when he says this seems to abolish logic, but it doesn't do so. The whole the example he goes on to with the system of measurement there, you can talk about how things work in your system of measurement. You can say there are how many millimeters in a meter? 1,000. All right, 1,000. That's a priori apparently, right? There are 1,000 millimeters in a meter, right? Is that a priori? Well, I guess that is a priori, right? Yeah. That's just a report about the system of measurement you're using. Now that's like logic. That is a priori. That's describing an internal fact about the system of measurement. But to have that as a usable system of measurement in place, there have to be these basic these underlying physical facts about the world. Yeah. And similarly, to have logic in place generally, there has to be a form of life, a stability in the world, for us to be able to engage in thinking at all. But nonetheless, when you're doing logic, you're dealing with stuff that really is a priori, and you're just describing internal characteristics of your representational system. Yeah. So there is a lot of spin in the ball here, right? Are you comfortable with this? Or reasonably uncomfortable? I'm not quite sure whether to go on to the next stuff I was going to go on to, or just open it up so everyone can pitch in right here. What would you like? Put your hand up if you want to just carry on, or put your hand up if you want to just carry on, and put your hand up if you want to stop a bit and talk about this. Okay, well, by a not overwhelming vote, we'll carry on. Right. Okay. Any last comments on that? Okay, we're not going away from this. We'll come back to all this on from a different direction on Friday. Okay, so let me do quite quickly. There's one really radical consequence that seems to follow from this kind of picture of what's going on here. Crispin Wright put it like this. If statements about meaning and understanding aren't stating facts, then doesn't that kind of blow up? Doesn't it mean that no statements at all state facts? I think this is one reason you naturally feel so uneasy about what Wittgenstein's doing here. So this is a way of trying to bring out, again, a bit more of what the picture is. The picture is, suppose in general you've got some statement, then you would ordinarily think, well, whether that statement is true, if I say Pat Brown's is open, then that depends partly on what the meaning is of my statement and partly on the way the world is, right? If the meaning had been something different, then the statement might have been false. If the world had been some different way, then the statement might have been false. Yeah? So So the meaning and the way the world is typically jointly determine whether a statement is true or false. But suppose that this is not a matter of fact, what the meaning of the statement is. Then how could the truth of the statement itself be a matter of fact? You're injecting something non-factual into the truth or falsity of any statement, whatever. So no statement is simply saying something that's a mere matter of fact. Wright puts it like this. Well, I mean, I think the diagram probably puts it better, but if the truth value of S is determined by its meaning and the state of the world in relevant respects, then non-factuality in one of the determinants can be expected to induce non-factuality in the outcome. Yeah. So Wright gives this example. Suppose you take something like whether it's worth going to see an exhibition. Is that a matter of fact? Is it worth going to see this exhibition? Well, one answer you might give is maybe whether the exhibits are intrinsically any good. I don't know if it's sculpture, maybe with the sculptures, whether the sculptures are any good. That's one key thing affecting whether it's worth going to see the exhibition. But maybe whether the way that is presented, that's a matter of taste. That's very subjective. Yeah, I think that's not factual, whether it's well presented. So then is the whole thing, whether it's worth going to see the exhibition, factual? Well, it can't be a straight matter of fact if this is one of the determinants of whether it's worth going to see the exhibition, and that's not a matter of fact. Non-factuality in the determinants can be, in one of the determinants, can be expected to induce non-factuality in the outcome. Yeah? Here's Wright saying it explicitly. Jesus. Okay, if among the determinants of whether it's worthwhile going to see a certain exhibition is how well presented the leading exhibits are, then if questions of good presentation are not considered to be entirely factual, then neither is the matter of whether it's worthwhile going to see the exhibition. Yeah? So, similarly, if the meaning of a statement, what the statement means, is not a matter of fact, then the truth or falsity of the statement can never be a matter of fact either. So if the community, if our responses, our whirl of organism, are determining what the meaning of S is, then our whirl of organism is determining the truth or falsity of the statement itself. Everything, the truth or any kind of truth or falsity, is being defined in relation to us. The facts about the Big Bang, the facts about the dinosaurs, the facts about the eventual fate of the whole universe, the truth or falsity of these statements is all being determined in part by the meaning of the statements, and that means in part by how we use them, how we respond to each other. So our whirl of organism turns out to be one of the factors affecting the Big Bang. You should be finding this outrageous, but the important point is not to write this down, if you see what I mean, but to see how we got here. Yeah. 1, 2. Yeah.
I guess I thought the idea that was that the meaning of S would be partly determined by the way the world is and how we relate to it. That something about the world and our situation in it is constant.
Yes.
So I guess the parallel with the exhibitions would be like, well, how was it? It was part of this statement whether it's worth to go see exhibits is determined by some evaluative. Like, is it well presented?
Yeah.
And it seems like, well, maybe there's no matter of fact, but we do have to evaluate something.
Right.
And that something is certainly a matter. So, like, it wouldn't be worthwhile for me to evaluate things going on at Pat Brown's rather than things going on in an exhibit, if that makes sense. So So the evaluation has to be kind of in the same ballpark as
Yes.
a matter of fact.
Yes,
Um,
in the same ballpark. Okay, carry on.
well, on the same topic.
Uh,
So I'm wondering, I guess, I would wonder if it's not that both of these things determine the top thing, but that the left thing, the meaning of S, is made possible by this thing on the right. The meaning of the way the world is.
It's not made possible. It can't be quite whether that is made possible by the meaning in the right, because I mean, whether the exhibits are intrinsically any good is presumably something separate from how they're presented. Yeah, so these are two different dimensions here. Yeah, but I think that part of what you're saying is this right? Whether exhibits are well presented, that must depend on some further real facts about the world. Yeah, yeah, and I think that's completely correct. But what you're saying here, I think, is that, well, look, here's how Wright states his conclusion: a projectivist view of meaning, a view that the community just projects meaning onto statements, or what's the right way to go in using words. That means we're going to have a projectivist view of what it is for a statement to be true, and then all statements are going to be projective. So grounded in the facts about us, all truths. And your point is, that can't be right. Yeah? Because at any rate, there have to be the facts about us, about our projections, for example. There have to be some proper facts somewhere. Yeah? So is this a way of putting it? There have got to be some statements that are straightforwardly factual. There have got to be some statements that just straightforwardly describe the reality that we're talking about. And then we can project different things onto that reality. But there's got to be a world of facts out there, of a scaffolding, a framework of facts for any projection, for the use of language to take place in. Yeah, is that yeah? That's putting it a bit more less specifically than you did, but is that the same idea? Yeah, I think that's right. That's what makes it seem like. That's one of the things about this picture of meaning that really sticks in the throat. It's because it seems like we've got to the point where meaning and the way the world is are jointly determining the truth or falsity of any statement, whatever. And this is something that's entirely assessed at the level of agreement in our responses. But then, how can we it seems like we can't have these purely factual statements. And then that sticks in the throat. You think, that can't be right. Yeah, whatever the problem is, that can't be the solution. Yeah, yeah.
Well, since it seems like this is going to be the case for any statement at all, can't we just subtract it out as a background effect? Because it still seems like we can distinguish between there seems to be nothing to do with hello, it's about the way the world is.
Yeah.
There's something to do with
That's right. This is where we start, and if you put it like that, yeah, there's got to be the bit where you can just report how the world is. But we're not going to be able to do that. If you subtract the meaning, you're not left with anything that's capable of truth or falsity at all.
Well, it's sort of like, you know, you said about the rule of measurement thing.
Yeah.
It wasn't that it depended on the fact that there was your
Yeah.
measurement didn't depend on the constant of
Yeah.
the world was. It was just the fact that it wouldn't have been a worthwhile exercise unless there was this constant.
Yeah, that's what I mean. But this is part of what I mean when I say there's a lot of spin in the ball here. There's something very appealing about that thing about measurement. Yeah, it seems to make sense. But then you start wondering, is it really coherent? Is it really a stable position to say, when I make the measurement, I'm just reporting on the length of the thing, but there are these other facts that don't really have to do with the length of the thing, that are affecting whether the system of measurement can be in place. Can you really keep these layers apart? Yeah, that's the way to think of it, that you've got a kind of two-layer picture here. You've got the representational system on the one hand, that's just reporting truths and falsities about the world. And then you've got the underlying things that are making all this possible. But whether you can stop that picture, the question here is, can you stop that picture of the underlying reality that's making it all possible from itself being entering into the characterization of truth or falsity for the system of representation? Can you really hold these two apart? Okay, well, at this slightly dizzying point, we'll pause for today and take this up on Friday. Okay, thanks, guys.